before we can create virtual desktops, we need a reference image, what is also known as a gold image. There are a variety of methods for creating a gold image, the main one obviously being manually, by creating a virtual machine in Hyper-V and installing Windows 8.1 into it, then running the sysprep command to generalize and set it ready for remote desktop services. The method I've chosen is to use a feature in the System Center 2012 R2 Configuration Manager product called Create VHD. This allows me to create virtual disk files for Hyper-V using a task sequence. I'll open up the console and you can see that I've already prepared Configuration Manager with an operating system image. I've literally taken this image file from the Windows 8.1 installation media and added it to Configuration Manager and distributed it to a distribution point. This underpins the task sequence. If we now visit the task sequence that I've created for this session and open it, you can see that it's a pretty bare bones basic task sequence. All I'm trying to achieve here is a stable build of Windows 8.1 in a minimum amount of time to demonstrate the capabilities of the remote desktop services. The most exotic thing taking place in the task sequence is the preparation of the Configuration Manager client, so that when the gold image is provisioned as a new virtual desktop, a new identity will be given to that virtual desktop, which will make it appear in Configuration Manager. I do it in this fashion because it accelerates the time it takes for things to happen and get the Configuration Manager client running as fast as possible after the virtual desktop has been created. To create a virtual desktop, a virtual hard drive, you just simply bring up the wizard, populate the path and the name, we select the task sequence that we're interested in. You now see the references to the task sequence, and you can see it is quite light. I have the Configuration Manager client, a wimpy boot image, and the Windows 8.1 installation media. I select Next. It's available on one of my distribution points, so I'll add that in. We'll skip over all of this. Select Next. And Configuration Manager will now begin to create the VHD, the virtual disk file, which we can then use as a gold image. Now this process can take quite a long time, so we're not going to stick around. The end result I've already created for us. Before we move on, we just take a look at the Hyper-V console, and we should see a temporary virtual machine has been registered. And if we launch the console for this virtual machine, we can see that Configuration Manager is running the task sequence in there, and it's actually currently right now installing that WIM. We can leave that alone because when it's completed, it shut the virtual machine down, which is a trigger for this wizard to complete. And once that's done, we have the virtual disk file, which, as I said earlier, can be used to create the virtual desktops. For this session, I've set up a basic lab that has a remote desktop connection broker, a remote desktop gateway, remote desktop web access, and the remote desktop virtualization host. All these components come together to allow me to provide virtual desktops to the users. The remote desktop web access provides a front end that allows the users to run applications on their virtual desktops and to access the shared sessions. The remote desktop gateway provides an ability for remote users to access the corporate resources while traveling, i.e. from the internet. The remote desktop connection broker is the centerpiece that takes care of all of the connections coming in. And the remote desktop virtualization host is the main piece for coordinating the creation of the virtual machines for the virtual desktops. Underneath the remote desktop virtualization host, you can see what are called collections. These are ones that I've already prepared. I have two servers, and I have split the roles between them. I have the gateway and web access roles on a server that's running in my DMZ, and the connection broker and virtualization host running on a server that's on the intranet. This is a basic setup with no high availability, and is simply there to assist me in showing you the product during this session. Let's create some private virtual desktops. Opening up Server Manager console, you'll see that the remote desktop services is available, and if we click on collections, there are others that I've already created here, but we'll create some new ones. Click on tasks, create virtual desktop collection. Lots of stuff to read. The name, now we select personal virtual desktop collection. That gives us the option to create a new desktop from a template, which is the gold image, the reference image that we've created, a VHD file, and it's permanent, and we can also allow the administrative access, i.e. add the user to the local administrative group. If we select next, I've already created a virtual machine on the Hyper-V host, and I've referenced the gold image VHD. It's here. You can see that it's already been used for another collection. That's okay, it's fine, we can share that here. We can disable automatic user assignment and allocate the virtual desktops per user basis. This is provisioning ahead of usage, or we can provision at the time of usage. I'm going to add the user to the local administrators group. We can issue an sysprep unattend file. I don't have one here, we don't need one for the test. Instead, we will let it set up a basic unattend file. We tell it which OU to put the computer account for the new private virtual desktop. At this point, we add in the Active Directory control group. This would be the Active Directory group containing the users that are allowed to use these private virtual desktops. For the purposes of this session, I'm just going to keep with domain users. I'm going to tell it just to create one private virtual desktop, and here we get to select a prefix for it. So I'm going to call it People Centric IT. At this point, we can provision how many virtual desktops should be allocated. I'm going to store these virtual desktops locally. We can review the summary file and then create. A new private virtual desktop is being prepared now. Or the collection, and it only contains one private virtual desktop, is being created for us. If we take a quick look in the Hyper-V console, we should see that the People-Centric IT virtual desktop has been provisioned. As you can see, it's ready and running. If we just launch the console, here's Windows 8.1 waiting to be provisioned to a user. Closing the wizard before it's finished allows us to return back to the console to continue. We can see a status update at the moment of creating for the People-Centric IT private virtual desktop collection. So while we're waiting for the People-Centric IT collection to complete, let's take a look at remote apps. I've already created a pooled virtual desktop collection called Applications, from which I will publish applications. Selecting the applications collection, let's publish an application that's installed inside of one of the virtual machines in the applications collections pooled virtual desktops. Select tasks, publish remote app programs, select the virtual machine you wish to scan for applications. Once the scan is complete, you can browse through the list, but if the application that you're interested in isn't presented, you can select Add, and you can directly navigate to the application's executable. We're just going to use Notepad for an example. Select Open. As easy as that, published. We can edit the properties of the remote app just to make sure that it's been presented in the remote desktop web access website. But there are other things that we can set in here, such as the parameters to be passed to the application. We can go further with granular security permissions and go beyond the permissions assigned to the collection, and we can set which file types are used to launch this application. The key one for us here for this demonstration is that it's presented to the web portal. Now that the application has been published, let's see what that looks like in the remote desktop website. Using Internet Explorer, let's visit the remote desktop website. I'll log in as a domain user. Presented to me are the virtual private desktops and pooled virtual desktops and applications that have been published to the groups that I'm a member of. Notepad, if you recall, was the application that we created and published. So let's launch that. And here's Notepad. Okay, so let's close Notepad and move on to...
We're now at my laptop and we're logged into the remote desktop web interface. My laptop itself is not on the intranet, it's on the internet. So we are accessing our VDI solution from practically anywhere. I'll just log in. As you can see, I have some collections presented, and the people-centric private virtual desktop is available to us, as well as the application. Just to show what it looks like, I'll connect to the personal virtual desktop that I created earlier, as the people-centric one is still building. Select it. The options for redirection that you want. And now I'm at my Windows 8.1 company desktop. This is a fully managed desktop. And as you can see, it has the Configuration Manager client installed. It's assigned to a site and fully functioning client. We can visit the software center. Here we can see all the applications that have been deployed to this virtual desktop. And if we head to the application catalog, you can see which applications are available for this user. As you can see, there's one application available for this user to install immediately. This is bringing all their users' applications directly to them so they can select what they want to install. Obviously, your configuration manager deployments will be targeted at VDI, virtual machines, so that you can patch them and install applications or update them as such over time. Obviously, you'd be managing your applications in your VDI gold images so that there's less activity taking place when the client first logs on. We'll leave this VM now. The state will be saved, and when we return it'll be exactly the same, because essentially it is a virtual machine running on Hyper-V. Before we wrap it up on the laptop, let's check out the remote apps and desktop connections tray tool. From here we can see which resources have been allocated to this user, and we can see the applications and the virtual desktops that are published to the user. If we click on View Resources, we can see our collections and applications in one place. These are also available on the Start menu. If you click here, you can see that they're listed on the Start menu for us. We can also launch notepads from here. Let's close Notepad.